Greetings. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. This is Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill, your Monday night fix for everything related to the local area. Bill?
That's why I'm shaking.
That's why you're shaking. It's been an exciting few weeks for both of us here. We've been traveling all over and doing various things, but we'll get to that maybe a little bit later. First of all, you had one announcement you wanted to make.
I do. Ted McClellan, who's Lansing born and educated, he went to LCC and MSU for his degrees. A journalist, freelance journalist, lives in Chicago now. When he went to Sexton High School, his name was Edward Klein. He's changed his name.
Really?
Because there is another nonfiction writer named Edward Klein that was there before him, so he said it's not going to work.
Interesting.
So his name is Ted McClellan. People will recognize him, though, for his newest book, which is Nothing But Blue Skies, and then 12 words after it that I never remember.
Right, it's one of those type. Yeah, that's
So
very popular
stupid.
nowadays, isn't it?
It's stupid.
It is stupid, yeah.
So anyways, but his book, Nothing But Blue Skies, is about basically the destruction of the industrial heartland of America. He visited 7 states and talked to scores and scores of people. He's put out a book about the history of the industrial heartland, why it happened, and there's some hope in it.
You said he was optimistic, at
little
least.
bit. Yep, he's optimistic. He's across the board a little different on our governor. He said he doesn't think the bankruptcy, for example, Detroit's going to work. It'll probably hurt the city. But he said somebody had to do something. I don't know if that's a good rationale, but
Well, Morningstar Bank just came out and said that they think the figures are wrong and that Detroit isn't actually eligible for bankruptcy because its supposed unfunded pension liabilities aren't as bad as people think. So there may not be able, the city may not be able to go bankrupt as they are currently intending, and maybe they just had to shake the dice up and get people to pay attention to Detroit for a while.
and the numbers have been so wretched for such a long time. Somebody with some credentials needed to run them.
Well, I'm still a little
But I
unhappy
didn't
that.
tell you when he's going to be here.
Oh, that's right.
He's going to be here Saturday, 1 p.m. at Barnes & Noble on West Saginaw, which is the only Barnes & Noble now.
Oh, that's right.
But
Isn't that weird to say? That feels strange.
Yep.
That is Michael
Speaking-
McCallum.
Sorry.
Speaking
I
of,
couldn't help but chime in with that.
Speaking of the destruction of industries,
Yes.
Barnes & Noble is
Barnes
on
and
that
Noble
track.
is gone, yes.
But
yeah.
I think people will find it fascinating because we all lived through it here. In fact, he said he's been writing this story for 20 years, really, because he lived through it.
But nobody paid any attention. Yeah. Not when they could have done something. There were those of us back when NAFTA was going in that said, gee, if we only made the requirement that the other countries had to match our labor laws and our environmental laws, we might have a shot at holding some manufacturing jobs here. But everybody assured me that, as Robert Reich did, who has not since changed his mind, all we had to do was give everybody a college degree and they'd be all right.
In a big debt.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that in a few minutes, about some of the pressures on young people. We'll be talking with Bonnie Wheeler from MSU's Counseling Center and talking with Dr. Elizabeth DeRath. But we would like to open the evening by talking with Michael McCallum, local filmmaker. Michael, good to see you.
Now there's a face to the voice. I just came out of nowhere with the Barnes & Noble comment.
Yeah, but if somebody was watching the webcast, they could see
They
you.
could see me.
If
were
they
like,
go to
"You finally spoke."
LansingOnlineNews.com, they will see the live webcast at the same time. And we now have it down to a science. It gets archived there. It gets archived on Ustream. We put it up on YouTube.
And it's there forever.
You know how that
In a
is
day,
when you
in a
make
day.
In a day.
One day.
That'll be the name of my next film, Forever in a Day.
What is the name of this film?
The name of this film, it's funny, Bill, that you were talking about titles to things, because I keep my titles very short and sweet.
Yes,
so
you
this
do.
is called Sure Thing.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
pretty easy. It's it's just Sure Thing. Boom. There. done.
Branding.
He could have called
Done.
his book A Bad Bet.
Right.
I mean,
well, that
but
was
not-
true, yeah.
That'll be a title to my next film as well. You're giving me a lot of
Okay.
material here, Bill. I
I like
appreciate
short
it.
and sweet. I can
So-
remember them.
This is another film that you're doing with your dad.
Correct. He and I actually co-wrote this together. It's the first thing that we've written together. This was last summer. We're at the Waterfront Bar and Grill that we like to go to in these short few very humid months in summer here in Michigan, before the 9-10 months of cold.
Which started yesterday.
Right, yeah.
48 degrees.
And so we were there having some beers and had something to eat, and I was talking about getting this last feature put together, Buffalo, that we're still currently in post-production for. You know, the features take some time, and that mountain isn't an easy climb. And but we were kicking around some ideas, and I told him, I said, man, I would really like to try to do another short project before the end of the summer. And there was that look between us of like, there's a lot on the plate already. It's kind of heaping. But he said, so, what are you thinking? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't have the whole thing figured out, but I have this scene in my head. And it's basically my character, John, who's being held and beaten up. And it's an opening voiceover that happens. And it kind of freeze frames. And you hear him say, some guys don't know when to shut up. And then it goes back into live action. He gets punched one last time, dropped to the ground, and he's on the ground spitting up blood, and it freeze frames again, and it says, I'm one of those guys. And I was like, that's all I have in my head. I don't know where it's going. I don't know why, who, what, when, and so we kicked around some ideas. The professional side of me, I wrote some notes on a styrofoam to-go box. I didn't have anything on me. That'll work. I wrote some bits of dialogue and some scenes and some bullet points for it, and I ended up typing it up. It was about a 9-10 page script, maybe 12 when it was finished, and we proceeded to put it together and shot it in August of last year. It's a 24-minute short, and it's basically about John, who is a compulsive gambler up to his neck in gambling debt, and he has one day to pay it off, and it's kind of what happens in that day. So it is black and white. And kind of finishing up this project, we're putting together a compilation DVD of my last 5 short films. Bill, you will love this because they all have short titles. So
Dog.
you have
Dog, cat,
you have Shadow Puppet, Slow Burn, Memento Mori, Small Town Fireworks, and ending with Sure Thing. So it's kind of funny putting them together. They all ended up being black and white. Even some that are comedy and comedic and have some other different kind of stories there.
Nowadays you have to take the color out, don't you?
You know what? You can, but there's still, you can always put a setting sometimes on the camera as well. So it's best to do that in post, figuring it out what it's going to look like. But to each his own. There's some probably filmmakers out there going, no, I have my way.
Before I forget, you should go see Ted McClellan, because book he's written 3 books. His first book was about addictive horse gambling. And he was addicted.
Oh, he was?
Oh, yeah. You could tell in the book.
I see. Ooh.
He took a year off from working. He had a nut, and he just wanted to see if he could make a living gambling on horses.
Whoa.
Well, you got to be pretty good to take that gamble. Yeah.
There are a handful of people, but I think more people pretend to be professional gamblers than actually pull it off.
Yeah, that's few and far between.
Michigan has enough gambling establishments that you can get into serious trouble here.
I think so, and the Keno at every single bar restaurant as well. There's probably somebody putting a hit out on me right now for saying those words, but...
Now, I wanted you in tonight because you have how many hours left on your Kickstarter?
I believe it's 20.
20, okay. All
20
right, so
hours.
we're counting down.
We're in the final stages. We're doing my first Kickstarter. All my other projects, my other features, Fairview Street, Handlebar, and Lucky, were shot and done before Kickstarter even was a thing. So I thought this would be a great way to try to raise some extra money to get this film done. Paying for the post-production, posters, flyers, DVDs, this compilation of DVDs, and also for the film festival entries. So, that adds
substantial.
Up. It does. It adds up. I mean, you're talking $20, $30, $40, $50 plus a pop to fill an entry form out, send the DVD out, and then for them to not accept it. You don't get that back, You don't get that back. That's how they run the festival. Yeah. So, to give it a kind of in that gambling theme here, to get enough roll of the dice. So I thought it was a cool, a great crowdfunding site to try. I was a little worried for some time. It was a couple weeks ago. We were at the $3,700 mark and needing 65 total. So we've reached the goal, thankfully. But at this point now, it's just trying to pay for some of the fees that Kickstarter and Amazon payments takes.
Honey, explain
I
For
was,
our
yeah.
listeners, how Kickstarter works. The real
Kickstarter, as opposed to GoFundMe. GoFundMe, you get whatever it is you raise. Kickstarter, you don't get a dime unless you eat your goal.
Yep.
And a
In
lot of
in the
times,
allotted
in the
time.
allotted
Yeah.
time, yes, and you can't extend it.
No,
So
no.
if you say you're going to do it in 25 days, you've got 25 days to do it. And the challenge is what a lot of people don't realize is at the same time, your fees can be, what is it, 3% to Kickstarter
It's
and
5% for Kickstarter and then 3 to 5% for Amazon payments.
so that they can handle the money for you because it's automatic payments there.
Correct. And then the other thing too is it kind of offsets, you know, the rewards set by each individual creator of their event and their fundraiser. This being a film, you know, sending DVDs out, posters, those things, you know, that's shipping and handling, postage that adds up pretty quickly. So
They urge you when you get reviewed by Kickstarter to see whether they'll accept you. They urge you to have a very rich funding scheme so that everybody from $1 all the way up to $1,000 will have a separate kind of reward that they get. So you
Sure.
have to spend quite a bit of time figuring out how to reward people for
what
different
would
levels.
work?
Yep.
What would entice
Yeah.
people? Yeah. So
And
know,
you did a nice YouTube on top that shows you and your dad at the bar talking
yeah,
over the
we
project.
filmed. You know, I looked at. I really did a lot of
Very
research.
wise.
It is, yeah.
And so we just shot. You know, I thought, why not film the little promo video? Those are the ones that actually work the best on the site that I saw, with somebody actually talking about it, not just text, answering kind of what if questions. You know, frequently asked questions. So why not film it at the waterfront, which is where we're going to do the premiere for the film as well. We're going to do that September 8th at 7 o'clock at the Waterfront Bar and Grill that's connected to the city market. So it's kind of, you know, the short films are a way that we can do kind of an informal, impromptu showing, have a band play afterwards, which is going to be a great local band from Big Sur. Their drummer, Sean Doolittle, actually makes his acting debut in the film. He plays one of the guys punching me at the beginning of the film. And they're going to play.
Is he a drummer?
He is. He used that. I mean, he's got the rhythm down at the punches.
That's good for you. Yeah.
It is. But we're gonna do the showing, the premiere there, and then have them play afterward. They also have a song in the film, in the scene that is filmed at the waterfront. So it's kind of a thank you to the establishment for allowing me to film in there. They keep the money for the booze and the food. We'll do a $5 door cover for people to get in, and it's just a great way, instead of me renting out a big theater
Right.
for out, a lot of the time some of the other theaters you have to rent out at a 2-hour minimum. So this is a great way to do something more informal, fun. We'll have the DVDs there. A buddy of mine with Michigan Shirt Works, Ted Wilson, is going to be printing up shirts on the spot of Rebel Pictures and some of the other films,
cool.
because we've kind of run low on the merchandise, and it's just gonna be a great night of entertainment. So
Even big name directors now are getting millions, literally, on Kickstarter for their movies, which is alienating some people who
Yes.
really think that Kickstarter was invented for filmmakers like you, who are local filmmakers looking to get a grub stake to be able to do something either in post-production or getting. And instead now you're seeing big name directors come on there and raise millions. And it's
it's kind of the conversations I've had about that. You can make arguments on both sides. You
Yeah.
can go, well, why shouldn't so and so use their name? They've built a reputation, and the thing is, everybody says is don't fund your own movies, don't put your money into your own movies. That's easy to say when you don't have to. When
Right.
you're at a point that you have to do whatever you can to raise the money to get the thing out there. The Zach Braff thing happened, and he was on Scrubs for like 9 seasons. He's been in a ton of other movies. Made his own first film, Garden State, which was a really wonderful
great
independent
film.
film. And even with Zach, there was some dissension and arguments about it online and in person. And now with Spike Lee doing it, it's
I know, Spike
it's,
is
it's like
he says he can't get funded otherwise.
he has a new movie coming out, The Old Boy, the remake of Old Boy, that hasn't even been released yet.
I know.
So it's kind of like Spike.
He can afford the tickets at
The Knicks game, the courtside. Well, that's his top reward is
sit with him?
$10,000 or more donation, you get his wife's ticket at one of the Knicks games.
20,000, you get his what? Never mind.
Yeah. But boom, it's out of the deal.
Oops.
Yeah,
Well, he'll get that easy.
yeah, it's just one of those, like, I guess.
It's a vanity thing too.
Yeah,
and it helps pre-sell your movies, I suspect.
Part of it's a hustle. Yeah,
part of
it's a
it.
hustle.
So, I mean, it's going to happen no matter what. I just think at what point is there a limit to it? I like that Kevin Smith at least came forward after Zach Braff did his and kind of made a post, a blog about that he vows never to do a Kickstarter because it's not really what it was intended to be. So they never really set ground rules for that, but there's just it's kind of a moral thing, maybe a little bit of going, really, do you need to,
I'm finding more and more friends doing it. I mean, one of our friends and a frequent guest here had some health problems, discovered that he had mold in his home, and he didn't have a way because he lives in the floodplain to get the home gutted and rehabbed, and he was getting sick all the time. So friends were willing to chip in on Kickstarter, and I mean, it's good for a lot of different things.
Completely. And then on the flip side of the coin, if that friend was Donald Trump, you might go, does he need to do does he need to do that's where it comes into is people that are kind of in need of getting whatever cause or project or thing out there and out in the world and really having to do it grassroots and get their name out there, their project out there. And a lot of us too, like myself, working day jobs and trying to scrape by, pay bills, and also have the time and the money and the resources to create and put something out in the world.
By the way, before we leave this topic, I want to tell you, I was reading the New York Review of Books the other day, and there was an article in there by Martin Scorsese, and just to show you how naive I am about how films are made, he talked about the history and the first time that anybody ever made a cut in film, and discovered that people could actually make the leap from action where they would see a close-up and then see the faraway shot and make the logical leap. He said and it apparently was quite a while after film had been invented before anybody thought of actually splicing it. It used to be you just watched it all.
Real time.
Real time.
Yeah, it was just, filming the,
and I had no
Great
idea.
Train Robbery was
Yes.
the first one with the guy who's just pointing the gun at the camera, the audience, pulling the trigger, and people like in the theater like moved out of the way because they thought it was they were being
when the train
shot
came at them, they
Yeah.
ducked, that kind of thing. But they discovered that you could actually cut the film and people would fill in the blanks and understand the action, and they hadn't realized that before. And I thought that was kind of clever. I hadn't realized that.
It is. I mean, it's an art form that hasn't been around that long, and I think there's a lot of things to.
It's thinking visually, and before that time, people did not think moving things visually. And then you talk to authors now, most of them have grown up on television, they think visually. They see that scene in their head.
They do. They do, especially from a writing standpoint, whether it's a TV writer or a film writer, they think in different terms now of actually visualizing what could happen. I mean, I know I do. I think in terms of ideas of shots right away, or how is it ending, it's going to go this way, and that's kind of following that tone throughout, making sure that whatever fits that component, whether it's the camera or the music or the people cast in it, in front of and behind the camera, those are all things that are going towards that tone.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with local filmmaker Michael McCallum, whom you can find on Kickstarter by using either his name or the name of the movie. I'm sure Thing also searches.
Yep, you can go to Kickstarter.com and type in under search for a project, Bet on a Sure Thing.
Cute.
So that was kind of a little nod and wink there, and a big thank you to Zach Taylor as well, who through his company ZTT Consulting. You can find them on Facebook.com/ZTT Consulting. Has really helped get us out there.
Pull that whole package together?
Yeah, I mean, we really talked about it. We set the site up together and really worked on getting it out there. So he's somebody that if you have a business out there and you need kind of a coach to kind of work you through some things, he's definitely somebody to talk to.
Oh, it's an intriguing new way where you can have community-funded projects you could never have before, and I just think that it's an interesting opportunity. And to me, it was made for people like you who are. What was the big award you won? It was a year or so ago. Filmmaker.
Yeah, I won. Well, now I'm pulling out the old resume. Now I just undo it right here. It was Michigan Independent Filmmaker of the Year. It was
That's-
through the
yeah.
Uptown Film Festival
was
in Detroit.
great.
So
Finally
was
starting
really-
to get some good recognition out of it.
it was really cool. For somebody for a festival like Uptown in Detroit to really notice and acknowledge somebody, happens to be me, outside of the Detroit area. Because a lot of times what you find is the west side of the state really supports filmmakers and artists on the west side of the state, and the east side of the state does the same thing, and the middle of the state kind of gets forgotten about. So
That's interesting. We
yeah.
may not have quite the same obvious culture, maybe. There's
I
this
just
sort of
think-
Detroit noir, and maybe
yeah, I think
the West-
film-wise, people just drive
Michigan
through.
GOP. I don't know.
I just think, Lansing has the film office. It has the East Lansing Film Festival and Capital City Film Festival. But I think other than that, people just kind of pass through on their way to a different
Mars.
city. Yeah, a different city, Grand Rapids or Detroit, and back and forth. So it was kind of a cool thing, too. This past April, the Grand Rapids Film Festival actually invited me out to direct their production workshop,
Oh, great.
which was really kind of cool to we put together a short film, a 5-minute short, and shot it in one day. So I was at
Those
the
are
helm
fun.
of I was at the helm of that. It was a lot of fun, and it was a wonderful time. So it was kind of cool for that acknowledgement on the west side of the state. So
Did you see that there's a new AMC series that's just finished filming in
Low
Detroit?
and Sun,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Sounded
did.
good.
When there
It
was
does sound
early
good.
on the internet, there was one of the New York City Movie Madness. You got 24 hours to shoot a film, and they gave you the genre and a couple lines of
They've
dialogue.
done that in Lansing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
The film fest.
but I did that early on.
Oh,
right?
oh, I see.
And that was the first and only feature film I will ever do. And I recruited friends to be in the movie. And little does he know, but I actually used Joel Ferguson's office over there in Old Town for part of the shoot. And I don't think he knows to
Bonnie,
this
what
day
is
it
the-
was
what
in
is
it.
the name of this film?
And how can we find it on
Because
the web?
we can get some search parties out here to find this
Yeah, I
thing.
think I succeeded in bearing that. I'm not even sure I put that one up on YouTube. It was bad. I decided that my future lay in documentaries.
We didn't have any zombies in it.
That was
probably
I
why,
was missing the zombies, but I did have a dog that talked, so that was
Okay.
good. And I,
Ah,
Who wasn't a zombie?
who wasn't a zombie, but is now.
talking dog. That's original.
Oh, yeah. Little thought bubbles. Learn how to do animation. And see, that's necessity is the mother of invention. You learn how to do all these things because you write something into the movie you have to fulfill.
Completely, or be able, especially with film, being so collaborative, is finding and being able to seek somebody out
Yes.
that can fulfill that job requirement. And it is. It's about working with people that can do things that you can't, or enhance what you can do. It is a team effort. There is always one captain of the ship, but it really comes down to everybody having a strength and a weakness, and hopefully complementing each other.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's wonderful to
Thank
have
you.
you in.
Thanks for having me
The
on.
countdown is underway. There's 20 hours left on the Kickstarter, and then we'll be seeing, I hope, Sure Thing coming up soon.
You will see Sure Thing September 8th, 7 o'clock at the Waterfront Bar and Grill. And again, you can go to Kickstarter.com and type in under search for a project, bet on a Sure Thing.
And
Or
we
you-
cannot tell people to do things because we can't give them
Oh,
action
no.
alerts on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no.
Yep,
If you're
yep.
online and you're doing whatever, you can definitely go to find me on Facebook, and you can find any more information on that.
That's great.
That's
Thank you
amazing.
so much
Thank
for
you so
coming
much.
in.
Michael.
Thanks a lot.
Short titles.
Yes.
Yes, always short titles.
God.
So what's the short title for our next two guests?
Well, it's, I think, Students Under Pressure.
Oh, that's not sexy enough.
Oh, well.
No.
Students on illicit drugs? I don't
You're
know.
getting closer. Druggy students.
Well, I think over-medicated students in many ways, and I'm worried about that aspect. But that's not the only thing I'm worried about. I just think that students are under enormous financial, emotional, and cultural pressure nowadays. I teach a class, and I look out every year. This is a frightening thought for you. My class used to be on Mondays. So the first person that many freshmen saw was me. 260 of them in the room, right? And I'd look out at that sea of faces, and those kids, a lot of them are really kind of scared. I mean, I don't think life is as clear a path as for maybe many of the previous generations, where if you got the degree, it was your ticket to ride, and life was good, and fortunes were there to be had and opportunities were there. So we've invited Dr. Elizabeth DeRath, who is an area therapist, and we've invited Bonnie Wheeler from the MSU Counseling Center just to talk about what's happening with young people nowadays as they're trying to make their way in the world. Elizabeth, what are you seeing?
Well, actually, I am not seeing as many people these days. And as I was listening to all of the new things going on around town, I'm thinking I'm not as worried about the cuts in funding to the arts and so on. And it sounds like there may be a lot of ADH activity going on around here. However, I hear about it. I have a daughter who is a teacher. I have a son who is a teacher. And I hear about this a lot. I get a lot of calls for referrals. I work primarily in the area of grief and loss. On the other hand, grief and loss does not occur in a vacuum. And so what you have are all of the other life problems. I would also add in to the introduction a bit on misdiagnosis, misdiagnoses, because I do think that a lot of the medication is available
Right.
for those kinds of things quite legally,
Yes.
quite legitimately.
For different kinds of problems, and when they're needed, they're effective.
Or,
But when my students are trading Adderall amongst each other, that's not exactly
That's probably not a good thing.
probably not a good thing. Is
No.
that what you see on campus?
That's what we hear about. It is
Yeah.
the most, I guess, misused would be the right word. Prescription drug on campus is Adderall.
Yeah.
Relieves anxiety. I mean, what's it used for? That's
It's
what I
used
guess.
for attention deficit disorder.
It's basically
primarily.
speed.
Makes you focus.
It is
Yeah,
speed.
helps you focus, and it really does, no matter what.
Even if you're a perfectly normal person,
Yeah.
if you take it, it'll enhance your
It'll
focus.
enhance your focus. And what we see fairly often is people who come in. We have a program at the Counseling Center where we do a full battery of psychological tests and a family interview, gather history. It's I'm guessing because I don't actually do that, but I would say it's four or more sessions where they come in and they do testing and all of this. Only 1 out of 10 at the most is actually attention deficit disorder. So we get 9 people who are coming in and saying, I took one of my, well, not all of them say this, but many of them
Pretty much
say
they did.
they took one of their friends and it really helped. Well, yeah, it does.
It would.
Yeah.
It would if
Yeah.
you had no problem at all.
Right, it would help.
And that's the unfortunate side of it. It's sort of like steroids in sports. It makes you a better athlete in
If-
many sports if you take steroids, but it doesn't mean that you have a deficit that needs to be made up for.
Exactly.
So that's a challenge.
But if we're talking long-term usage or misuse, it can create difficulties.
Well, yes, yeah.
So, you end up with kids who are addicted. You end up with creating anxiety rather than solving
Because
anxiety.
where they're going to get it, how they're going to pay for it.
Not only that, but the medication itself.
So it creates
Yeah.
anxiety over long term.
Sure. And
It changes your brain chemistry over time.
it does, and you have sleep disturbances,
And that's a key.
and you're taking it to stay awake, a lot of these kids, so they can study. The other thing, I was talking with someone today, it's being sold, so it becomes an illegal sort of drug for, I heard the going price on that is like $5 a pill. I thought, so kids are
That is the
on
going
both
price.
ends of that, the users and the sellers. You can create problems and difficulties. It's a whole social problem as opposed to just an individual sort of area.
And I think it seems perfectly logical to me that young people would turn to these aids because many of them have gone to school with kids who were put on Ritalin from an early age. They've been given those kinds of drugs in elementary school. So therefore, there's this idea that, the solution to your problems if you're not doing well in school is that there's a pill for it. And I'm afraid that's the message that they're receiving. I find it very odd that school districts that are zero tolerance on everything else, including a pair of fingernail clippers as a weapon, will still have kids medicated on a lot of these drugs in elementary school. So we're seeing sort of the end result of that too, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we are. And one of the things that happens is that students who are doing very well are really working very hard at their grades, and they may have taken Adderall during exams last term or something, and it really helped them focus. They did really well, so they want more. And they also were studying so hard they're not getting a balanced life because they're very anxious about their grades. So without that balance, you take somebody who was a high school senior and they maybe were in 2, 3 sports, maybe they walked to school, they were very active, and they had balance because they had to take all these different courses. They get up to campus, they sit a lot. They sit in class, they sit at their computers, and they study a lot, and at some point they get really antsy.
Yeah.
And they think, I can't focus. But what they need to do is go
Exercise.
Exercise.
Yeah.
They need to get a balanced life so that they're working out all that built up energy in a way other than sitting and looking at a computer.
What percent?
Or you in class.
What percentage of students are we talking about on campus? Is there any way to make a rough estimate?
Who are
On
using?
on any campus, I guess.
I don't actually know. Do you?
Well, I looked it up today. As a matter of
That's what I was
fact.
hoping.
Yeah, and it was talking more about misusing. And that was 1/3 plus. I
Ooh,
was
more than I thought.
amazed. I know, I was
It's
amazed.
huge.
Way
And that's
more than I
misusing,
thought.
not using.
Right.
That's correct. You have,
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
and it doesn't just start in most colleges. I mean, that is something
Sure.
that they
Like you
will
said,
bring
it starts in
with
a high
them
school
from
or
high
grade
schools.
school or whatever.
And like everything else, probably moving down in age and usage.
And we still have all those other nice legal drugs on top that you can get into trouble with. Alcohol is still a huge problem on college campuses. We've seen a rise in binge drinking over the years. There was the occasional binge drinking in my era. Most people were too poor to be able to do it. Nowadays, I think we see more and more birthday celebrations trying to drink your age, that kind of thing, that are
it's
very
dangerous.
potentially
So would
dangerous.
people use it before a social situation too?
I think Adderall is a drug that you use to perform better in school.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is that,
Yeah.
and I think part of that is the pressure that I read the other day that when you and I went to college, Bill, it was the cost of a car. Now it's the cost of a house. And when you look at that kind of total bill,
Cheapos.
It depends on what college you go to, or if you're in state or out of
Right.
state.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I was just reading today that the average veterinary graduate is $133,000. So if you go through veterinary school, it's going to be $133,000 debt. I mean, you're graduating with huge debts nowadays. So that's an awful lot of pressure on kids. Those grades matter.
Those grades
Yes.
matter a lot. They want it.
They
They
do.
come in and they're under pressure to do something so they can support themselves. So you don't get as many students, even if they love theater.
Mhm, yeah.
They're not coming in and going, I really want to be a theater major, because their parents are like, we're putting out this kind of money, we think you should go into engineering, or they're good at math, and some teacher says that. So, they're really very aware
Yeah.
of the economic pressures on them.
I remember when I was in high school, I came from a family that did not have much in the way of money. And so I didn't dabble in art classes or theater classes for fear I might get a B. Why would I want to lower my grade average with a class that wasn't required? That was usually the logic behind that. And I suspect we're seeing more and more of that
Much of the
nowadays.
same. Yeah.
Some of the major tier universities, I know the other thing that happens if kids take advanced classes in high school, they don't even bother opting for them because they want an easy class they can get an A.
Oh,
Oh,
It's really common.
because you have to build up that record.
Well, you don't want to get a B.
Right.
If you're going to be a doctor or the best engineer in the world, or that's really common.
and that is one of the really big pressures on the students when we see them come in. They have done very well in high school, or they wouldn't be accepted,
Right.
and they hit college level classes, particularly things like organic chemistry, that they really have to work at, and it doesn't come as easy. And they're very anxious about that, and very distressed in general. I do want to go back to the medication
Yes.
thing. I can say that the students who come in the counseling center, and I'm not certain of which one it's like 16 and 23%. I think 23% of the students who come into the counseling center are already on psychotropic medication.
Before they hit your front door.
before they hit our front door. Now, actually, as I say that out loud, it might be 16%, and then we refer another 23. It's one way or the other, and I apologize for not checking that. But
So we're looking at a total of 40%.
yes.
Who end up in their college career at some point,
On
probably being
psychotropic
on a
medication.
psychotropic medication.
Mm-hmm.
That is huge. That is all.
You thought the 60s was the era of drugs on campus.
We didn't have to have prescriptions.
Oh.
We did not.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And the irony, of course, is that when thinking back to the old hippie 60s, they can't bring their medical marijuana on campus, can they?
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wouldn't let them do that. Let them bring illegal drugs on campus.
No.
Cool.
Well, there's an enormous amount of pressure, though, nowadays. When I look at a lot of the students in journalism, for example, they were the editor of the high school newspaper, and they had the status. They were the top writer and, the top person in their school when it came to that kind of media. They come here, and everybody else in the class was the editor of their high school newspaper, too.
That's correct.
Absolutely. I mean, I always think of our students at MSU as incredibly brave. I mean, there's 50,000 students over there.
Yeah.
And the freshman class is like 8,000.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge to come and try and figure out where your classes are.
Right.
And realize that you're now a little fish in a huge pond. Like you're saying, you were the head of your
Yeah, you had the top
yeah,
status.
the
You were
top
great.
status,
Yeah.
and now you're maybe on your floor.
And Elizabeth, when you talked about grief counseling, one of the things that always wounded me was that I did the Victims in the Media program and trying to teach journalists, as you well know,
As I know, yes.
how to work with
remember
people
that.
in trauma. And when I would do those presentations in the journalism classes, and by the time that I was doing as many as 18 3-hour presentations in different classes per semester, I would have students inevitably break down because they had been through, many of them experienced the death of a grandparent, for example. That often happens to kids while they're in college. The other thing that I had happen frequently was that many of the kids from urban areas had lost a family member to violence. Terrible situations where kids would come and talk to me after class and they'd break down, and they're under a lot of pressure.
And that is only a part of being in school. That's why I'm saying grief and loss and crises don't occur in a vacuum.
Yes.
So you're still trying to keep up with your normal everyday life and deal with these issues. And there's a lot about all of it that we don't understand. So kids may turn to illicit drugs or whatever. In order to keep on going.
To self-medicate.
To self-medicate. Sometimes the ADHD medication can be about simply feeling more on top of things. Feeling, it's kind of like a high.
Yeah. And feeling less in some ways.
And feeling less in many ways. That's right, which is a part of the goal of alcohol. Of a lot of drugs.
Yeah, when did the drugs that we're talking about that they're commonly using become more, obvious or more available? Or it wasn't in the 60s.
What, the Adderall, the Ritalin? I think Ritalin was one of the first, and I think that was kind of like in the 70s.
I think in the 70s.
It's the gateway drug.
70s. No, that's pot.
I thought it was milk. Almost everybody I know who went on to harder drugs started on milk at some point in their early life.
What I was getting at is, I'm certain when I went to school in the 60s, we had the same pressures. Or maybe we didn't. I know money was not one of them. It was so cheap to go to MSU, it was unbelievable.
Right.
That is true, yes.
Part-time job you could pay to go to MSU.
Right.
And some
So
of
I
the
didn't
other,
care.
And there were part-time jobs you could actually go out and do. And in the summer, you could go to
Yeah.
work in the shops and make really good money.
And you could actually go out and get a job. And
Right.
At the other
I
end.
can see that stress right on
Yes.
because no student can pay their way through, or very
Very few can pay their way through. And the other thing that I don't think we had to deal with when we were in school was the volume of students who are worried about their parents.
I do want to talk about that.
Helicoptering, was that this?
Well, no, we have a substantial number of students whose families had worked in the auto industry,
Yes.
had worked in whatever, and their parents are losing their homes.
Yes.
And they're going to school.
And they're going to school. And their parents are, they might have been doing very well for a long, long time, and suddenly they're out the door. I've talked to students whose fathers lost their jobs a year ago and hadn't bothered to mention it. They actually would go to work every day.
Yeah.
And the family had no idea they'd lost their job. So I think that's the kind of pressure that a few students in, when we went to college might have experienced, but not very many.
Oh, the loss of automobile
Right.
executive jobs around Detroit, because that's where a lot of our students come from.
Absolutely.
I had a young woman whose dad had lost his job, and now he was trying to replace it by creating a product he was selling online, steps up to the couch for aged pets. And you know what? That's probably not going to replace the income that he made from that high-level vice presidency that he had before. And that's much dicier. And unfortunately for her as well, it meant that the money she had counted on for school might not be there.
Right.
So will I get to come back next year? They saved money for me, but will they actually need that money to live on? That's an awful thing for
Right.
families wrenching dislocation for families to deal with. It's so common here in Michigan.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I've talked to students who have 3 jobs. One job to support the gas money to go back home to the other job where they give the money to their family, and the other job to help them pay their own tuition. I mean, a lot of us, we had a job in college, but it wasn't anything like that kind of pressure.
I wouldn't have taken so many 0 points in classes then. Hey, who cared?
Well, see, that's the
seriously,
other
who
thing.
cared?
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Nobody cared.
But the other part of it is Bonnie and I were talking, I have a PhD. I wouldn't have been able to get into MSU with my high school background. I mean, I was college prep, but certainly not the kind of academic pressures that kids have nowadays.
Going through for the advanced degree is a huge issue nowadays. And you have to question if there are the jobs at the other end of that scale as well. I mean, we're seeing
Absolutely.
an abundance of PhDs out on the market now, sort of itinerant teachers in different colleges around, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's a really tough ballgame, and I do worry about young people facing those kinds of pressures in their lives because they don't really have the life experience yet to know what's going to come up. I mean, they just saw the crash of 2008 occur, where many of the people lost so much of their retirement, lost so much of their money to, what, am I graduating into the teeth of a recession, or is there going to be an upsurge? This is a worldwide phenomenon. When we look at what's happening in Greece, for example, the 19 to 24-year-olds globally are the ones who are really in trouble. We're this sort of lost generation. Are they going to get that shot at that all-important first job? Because if you don't get the first job, it's very hard to get the second one.
That's right.
It's true.
And so I don't know. How do we help them? What can we do to help young people cope? I suppose people like me ought to get out of the way to open up a few more jobs for others.
I think being there, providing whatever services you can, and MSU has always been great with the counseling center, those kinds of things. But realistic expectations too.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
And
that's tough to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and
That's-
sometimes
the
I
whole-
think parenting the parents, because I think
That's
the
what-
parents need some
Well,
realistic training as well.
I was also going to say the way universities and colleges recruit,
Right.
it's false advertising in a lot of ways. I mean, I can't be more honest about it. And I know you have trouble speaking of that, but they set something up for some sort of this. I mean, they create the pressure themselves. And how they promote the university locally, and how they recruit students.
Well, Cooley Law is famous for being sued on that. The Sixth
Yes,
Circuit
that's true.
kicked out the case where the students were arguing that they were misled into thinking that there would be a job at the other end, there'd be a career at the other end. But that lawsuit went away. But I think universities are facing
They
the
create
kind of-
expectations
so.
that
Yeah, they
aren't
create
reasonable anymore.
Now, in our era too, Bill, when you went off to college, at orientation there wasn't mandatory participation on the part of the parents. We now bring parents in, and we've made them a part of the school experience. But in the meanwhile, we've changed federal laws where we can't really tell parents anything.
Right.
I mean, the
Right.
FERPA law, I think maybe you can speak a little bit to that. It's an interesting law because it says, I think parents don't know that I, as an instructor, I can't even confirm that a student is in my class.
Right.
I can't say to the parent, oh yeah, that your student is taking.
And that certainly is something that is made clear in the parent orientation
Yes,
program.
yeah.
I mean, we have there are sessions from mid-June. The last one is actually August 24th, but they have a little break in here, early August. But where we talk to maybe 300, 350 parents every day.
What's their
4 days a week.
What's their major concerns? What do they ask you, the parents?
They ask safety questions.
Yeah,
Well,
rape,
I can speak
yeah,
to
sure.
what the
Meaning
portion
like
of it
sexual
that-
assault or?
Well, I'm in a group of people. We have the police, the Olin Health Center team, and someone from the counseling center. It's me about a third of the time, and we cover all those areas,
Oh, okay.
the health and in both the health and the police and us, we talk about confidentiality. Excuse me, confidentiality, and talk about how you can have your students sign a release for specific information, but we don't encourage students to sign like all their health information because there may be stuff that they don't want their parents to know, and their parents probably don't want to know.
Well, I think
I'm thinking STI immediately.
yeah, I think I'm trying to think when they introduced sending grades to students. That was in my era. That was a
Right.
great breakthrough.
Mhm.
Parents never got the grades.
Yes, that was a jolt to many parents, wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I'm
because
the only
the
one who got the
idea,
grades. I did great.
it's the old argument is, but I'm paying for it. Well,
No,
yeah.
they weren't, so it didn't matter. I guess.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Dr. Elizabeth DeRath, and we're also talking with Bonnie Wheeler of MSU's Counseling Center about some of the challenges that students are facing and some of the challenges parents are facing. Here you have a student in college, you want to help them, you want to be supportive, but at the same time, I think college then and college now are two different things.
Mhm.
You may not realize some of the unique kinds of pressures that students are under nowadays compared to your era.
I won't mention the names because I'm sure there's some violation, but I know a number of counselors doing what you do, Bonnie,
Okay.
and their experience they're probably in their little 50s, and their experience is when they started that job it was relatively easy. Today it is
It is
it
very
is
hard.
beyond belief hard. They say
Mhm.
the complex problems that kids come into
Hmm.
that should be seeing you, Elizabeth. It's pretty amazing. I mean, counselors are asked to do a lot more than they ever were.
Well, and our staff is a real diverse staff in terms of our training. We have licensed professional counselors and or licensed social workers, licensed and masters social workers,
Yeah, MS.
something LMSW, and PhD psychologist, licensed psychologist on staff as well. So we're real diverse in who we have. So if there are issues that are more appropriately seen by psychologists, we have someone on staff who could do that.
How many are there at MSU?
How
that
many
do what you
students?
do? No. What do what you do?
Not nearly enough.
Yeah, okay.
True. I think that's
That was the other thing
true.
I was going to mention too.
Yes.
That's true community-wide, though. I mean, you
Right.
look at
Right,
you
there aren't
look
the
at
services out there.
the services available. You look at public services available, and you really, unless you have got a dual diagnosis or if you have a serious disorder like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, behavioral disorders to be seen,
Not going to happen.
it's very, very rare to have public monies, to have public assistance for that. So you look at the myriad of difficulties and problems that people, families, kids are facing. It's no wonder that there's
Well, one of the things that medication does also is it allows students who might have previously been too ill to attend to now be part of the student body. And I think one of the things that I feel a pressure about as an instructor is that I really have not been given the kinds of tools that I might need to do a rational evaluation of when a student comes to me for help. What should I do? I mean, I've had students come and reveal anorexia and bulimia because I give a talk at the beginning of the semester about my stepdaughter's death at 34 years old from a combination of alcoholism and bulimia. And I tell the students that, because it happened to me, I gave this talk once, and one of my students in the class, her roommate lost 40 pounds in the first few months of school, and she actually was the one that called the students' parents and said, "I think your daughter's dying." And when they got down there, they immediately had to whisk her to a hospital. They hadn't seen her. They lived far away. They didn't know. I mean, we have a lot of kids that have extraordinary problems like that coming on, and we have to tell them, oh, how do you intervene? How do you help somebody? If you have a roommate in trouble, where do you go? How do they, when you approach a teacher, what can you expect from the teacher? Where should I send them? Lots of issues like
Lots of
that.
issues like that. We've been working for the last 4 years to do training. It's called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. And essentially it's a training that we've trained staff, faculty, student organizations. We train all the RAs. Really anybody who we can get in our foot in the door, we will train them. And it's a protocol for expressing caring, where you see the signs, like this roommate did, and giving permission to express some kind of caring of, you seem to be feeling really bad.
Yeah.
We're giving them some real tools of how to do that. Staff as well. And I know a couple years ago we trained most of the maintenance staff.
Oh, that's an interesting approach.
Because they see things in the residence halls and in the classrooms that we may not see. They may just notice some change. Somebody who says hi to them all the time suddenly is not.
Mm.
And so it's a program that really gives permission to express caring and concern, because that can make a huge difference. And then we also give them the resources of the community mental health, of calling us, of the crisis line, the sexual assault program, the substance abuse programs, and community resources.
Whom do you call as a critical partner? I know they're doing more of that in high schools, like when they tend to have many suicides in a school district or whatever. It's okay. What do we do? How do you educate kids about what to do? To whom do you talk? And then, if you look at a school counselor, where do I go with that information?
When I would do lectures on how to report on suicide, I also had to be mindful of the fact that I might have students in the class who were contemplating it themselves. So you have to be very careful on almost any kind of sensitive topic like that you bring up. And if a discipline like journalism, we're often talking about dealing with people in trauma. I've had students come to me, and one young woman was the young woman who she burst into tears in the middle of a class, and I found out later that her best friend was epileptic and couldn't drive. So she gave her driver's license so that she drove one night. And she ran into a tree and died. And so this young girl has been dealing with that guilt ever since, and blows up in the middle of class. And you don't know how many other traumatized kids there are in the same room. I mean, there's so much sadness out there now. So much, students have seen a lot. Especially,
you run into that with psychology classes,
Yeah.
abnormal psychology. Everyone has a diagnosis by the end of the class,
Yes.
and you have to explain.
Every week you have a new one.
It's on a continuum.
Well,
yep, I think I have that.
And I think with our current student population, they have so much access to information.
Yes.
Oh, sure.
I can't tell you how many times somebody's come in and sat down in my office and said, I think I have OCD. I looked on, and,
Oh, yeah.
and they've looked up everything
Sure
they can
enough.
possibly look up on, all different disorders, and have diagnosed themselves before they ever walk in the door.
I
Is
used
that
to.
good or bad?
Yeah.
Thank
does
goodness
sound-
they walked in the door.
Yeah,
At least,
at least
that's
they
a
walked in the
relief.
door. It got them in the door.
Yes.
Yeah. Which
I
is
used to
good.
put
Yes.
MD after my name for manic depressive. I figured I earned that degree. I look too at some of the new problems that in our era we simply didn't talk about. Part of the reason that the stats look worse for nowadays than in the past is that we didn't acknowledge a crime like stalking until fairly recently.
Exactly.
Just because somebody gave you candy every Friday and told you how much they loved you and left notes under your door, you couldn't go to somebody and say that was a bad thing, because 20 years ago that wasn't perceived as a bad thing. And
Right.
we have identified more aberrant behaviors in that sense, haven't we? I
I
mean,
think so.
yeah, we're more
I
sensitive to it.
absolutely
I would
agree.
say
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But then I look at a consequence of untreated mental illness, as we saw with Virginia Tech, where that young man, obviously, who had killed more than 30 people there with an assault weapon, had set out some fairly strong warning signs early on. But in a large school, I think it's so difficult to know.
And what do you do? How do you convince someone who's 18 or over,
Right,
who
who's
says
legal?
no to treatment?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're
The
legal,
laws
so they
have
can,
to work together too.
Yeah. Well, and I know that at MSU there's a huge effort to coordinate information in terms of people who may be at risk
Right.
for any number of things. Like if the residence hall will see somebody who's having some difficulties, they might consult with the Olin Health Center. They might consult with us. There's a whole team. They recently changed the name, so I wish I could tell you the name.
It's probably a really long name.
No, it's actually
Short
shorter.
names.
For a while, I think it was CARES, but now it's something shorter.
Which stood for
Yeah.
something
Right.
longer.
Yes.
But it's a coordinated effort, including the police, including residence life, including the health and wellness folks, the mental health people, where we're really trying to be aware and increase awareness on campus of students who are at any kind of risk.
Well, information sharing is difficult.
It is.
And, I mean, there are obviously privacy concerns. There's also confidentiality concerns. How secure are those records? Are they really under lock and key? How much gets out into the public? Part of the challenge is that you probably have student workers who are working on the same computers that may carry sensitive information. I mean, I remember an old friend of mine.
We don't actually, but.
Oh, good.
Good news.
Good
Yeah,
news.
yeah.
You figured that part out.
No, we have no student workers at the
They have
counseling
no
center.
student workers,
Yeah.
they have no computers, one or the other.
Well, I had an old friend who was a psychologist at the prison, and he also had a private practice. And he had the prisoners transcribing the notes from his private
dear.
session.
Not
And he
that.
discovered a few months later that they had a thriving blackmail business where they were able to extract large sums of money given to their families for not revealing certain affairs and so
Oh,
forth that
my.
had been revealed in the counseling
Interesting.
sessions. Yeah, so you have to be very careful about it. I mean, I understand the reasons why these are such sensitive issues, and we can't just share them with parents.
I have a question. Again, it's probably one of these gut answers, but what percentage do you feel it's legal Adderall versus illegal? Is there how many really have prescriptions and are then
We have-
supplementing it
Well,
by?
if 1/3 and a little bit more are using it illegally, then it would make sense at least that the other ones were prescribed that. Now, I question diagnosis as well on a lot of things. That who's doing the diagnosing?
Right. That's
Where
one
is
of
it being done?
Right.
one of the things. Yeah.
One of the things you have to think about is that the drug companies themselves, at a certain level, must be culpable because they must notice the high level of production and manufacture of those pills that end up back in circulation beyond what the prescriptions would ever cover. We see that they certainly haven't been too vocal about this illicit drug trafficking. One of the challenges that I always felt when I was working in the criminal justice side of things and looking at community policing was, as I kept telling students, you don't see the people in the ninja outfits with the battering rams coming into the dorms in order to bust the people selling Adderall, but the way that you do illicit drugs in the inner city every night.
Yeah.
It's a very sort of refined atmosphere where you don't do that kind of thing, and it's sort of sub rosa. We haven't seen any big arrests for anything like that for Adderall rings on campus.
But even if you look at psychotropic medication, I mean, what was the percentage you were saying it was?
40%.
Around 40%.
40%, and I'm
That's
assuming that's
40%.
legal.
40% of the students who come to
Come
the
into
counseling
the counseling
centers.
center.
Yeah, which may
Self-select,
pre-select
yeah.
to it.
Self-selected, yeah.
Yes.
But if you look at that, how many more need it? That's
Uh-huh.
legal. That is legal. But okay, when you look at adults, when you look at kids' parents, how often have you heard, "Oh, gee, you can't sleep. Well, I've got some medication that might help you."
Yeah.
And I mean, usually there's also, if you look at in what proportion the legal drugs are being used with alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or,
And that is a big problem.
oh, sure,
on
or
campus for
pot
people.
at this point, even. I mean,
Do you think that we do a good job of socializing young people to learn how to drink? I mean, one of the problems of a 21-year-old drinking age is that kids are going to be exposed to alcohol long before that. But we don't really give them an opportunity to learn how to handle themselves with alcohol when they're in high school and older. We don't give them social opportunities to do that. So some of our policies may be short-sighted in that direction as well.
I would agree.
But why did we ever go back to the 21 years old law? It was reduced to 18 for a while, I remember.
They did it through highway funds, remember?
I
The
couldn't
traffic
remember
deaths
why.
were so high that states could not get federal monies unless they retook
Okay.
I
the
couldn't
drinking age
remember
back
that.
up to
Couldn't remember
21.
that.
That was the
Yeah.
trick.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We've been talking with Dr. Elizabeth DeRath and with Bonnie Wheeler of MSU's Counseling Center. This is a topic I'm sure we'll return to time and again. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. You've been listening to Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill. Make sure to tune in next Monday night, and we'll see you again then. Thank you very much. Click little magic button.